In this video, I'm going to take you through my in-depth weekly review process inside of Roam Research. Now, what is a weekly review? A weekly review is a periodic time where I clean out my task and knowledge management systems and reflect on my journal from the past week. I think we've all heard that we should take some time to sit down, reflect, and schedule our priorities for the upcoming week. But barely anyone actually does it. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you a weekly review doesn't have to be some monster lift, some really difficult thing. My weekly review can be boiled down to just a simple checklist. All it is going through email, reviewing past and upcoming calendar items, going through my desktop and downloads, going through my notes from the past week, processing tasks, planning activities with friends, reviewing my 12 favorite questions, and finally going through some journaling questions from the last week. And now that might seem like it's a lot of things, but I promise it all goes by really fast. And the feeling of clarity that I get after I go through my weekly review in just 35 minutes is incredible, and it makes it worth it. So let's go through each step in my weekly review process, and you'll learn how to do it yourself inside of any system. It doesn't have to be Roam Research. I personally like doing it in Roam Research because that's where I have my personal knowledge management system. So the first step is email. Now, according to a PPM Express survey, 28% of knowledge workers are now spending their time inside of email. That's a lot of time, especially if you don't have a workflow or process for going through it. So the key to getting email done fast in a weekly review is having a workflow. The first thing I do to create a workflow is schedule a time to check email in the first place, which usually is at night, once a day, and during these weekly review processes. And then I ask myself one question as I'm going through each of my emails. Can I complete this in less than 2 minutes for whatever action is associated with it? And what is the next action? If I can do it in 2 minutes or less, I do it right away. And if I can't, then I ask myself 4 things. Can I send it to my calendar? Can I send it to my task manager? Can I send it to a reference app? Or can I send it to a read it later app? I work through every single email in this way, and I usually go from the bottom to the top every single time. And that way I see old things first to new. And I also use shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts as I'm going through to make the process even faster. So going through my email right now, I'll start at the bottom. There's not that much because I am not in a job where I get a crap load of emails all the time. But going right from here, we can see that this is some photos from my mom, and I don't have to look at them right now because it would take more than 2 minutes. So there's no task associated with it either, so I'm simply going to archive it because I don't think I need to put this in my Read It Later app, in a task manager, in my calendar, or in a reference app. I can just archive this. This is a blog post which I sent out to my subscriber base, and I myself am a subscriber on my own blog so that I get a visual of what it's like to get emails from my blog. So this also has no action associated with it and nothing else that I need to do with it, so I can simply archive it. This is a contract form that I completed with my editor for my YouTube channel. Once again, there's nothing associated with it. And I want to say that while I'm going through this, if I wasn't recording a video, I would do this much faster, but I'm trying to explain the process so that it's a little bit more clear. Payment received, once again, nothing required. A MasterCard was added, nothing required. This is just an Amazon order of me ordering the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yes, I'm going to read that on Kindle. This is another reminder of me ordering something. I don't need to do anything. And here is a Buzzsprout email. This is something, podcast hosting service that I signed up for earlier today. And this does have an accent associated with it, but I can do it in less than 2 minutes because all I have to do is verify the email. So I'm going to do that right now. Simply put in my login credentials and my email is verified. And that's it. And here is a quick one question. I can also do this in 2 minutes. Let's just read it over quickly. So here is a podcast guide for how to begin my podcast. I don't need to look at any of this right now. And this actually does have a next action associated with it because in my task manager, I have a project for this podcast that I'm starting. So because the task manager I use is Todoist, it is right here with all of my tasks inside of it, I would simply click this up here, add to Todoist, and it would actually make a task out of the email that I have, and I would simply type the name associated with what that task is, the task associated with the email. So if I was going to make this into a task, it might be read quick start guide for podcasting. And then I would simply add it to my task manager and I would be good. But because that is not happening, I already have that as a task. I don't need to do anything. Another thing that I might do for an email, if I wanted to send it to, if I wanted to put it on my calendar, if it was a calendar item, say a time to meet with someone to record a podcast, then I would simply go to my calendar and wherever it is, schedule it in with the link associated with it. And then I'd just click save and it would be in my calendar ready for when I do whatever that is. And then if I wanted to send it to a Read It Later app, I would simply click Control R, which is the shortcut for my Read It Later app reader. But that might not be the Read It Later app that you use. You might use a Read It Later app like Instapaper or Mento, which allows you to save articles for reading later. So those are all the different things that you could do inside of an email. And now we are going to move on to reviewing past and upcoming calendar items. So I like to see the calendar as the hard stuck things that I want and have to get done in my day. These aren't just any random tasks that I'm just going to put inside of a calendar. Your calendar needs to be trustworthy. So when I'm going through my calendar for my weekly review, I usually scan 2 weeks back and 4 weeks forward. And while I'm scanning, I ask myself if there's any tasks or follow-ups or things associated with it that I see in any of the calendar items I have that I need to follow up on. So if we go backwards, I'm just going to scan through all of these days and see if there's any task associated with them. I don't think there was anything at all associated. The only thing I can think of actually is I hung out with a friend named Addison a bit ago, and I'd like to message him a thank you for hanging out, which will take less than 2 minutes. So I'm going to do that really fast just because I had a really good time with him and I want him to know I was grateful. All right, and the next step is to go through the desktop/downloads. Now, looking here in my recent folders in Google Drive, which is where I personally organize all my files right now, I don't see anything that needs to be organized under a particular project. Usually, if I did have something I needed to organize, I would go through and put it in somewhere in my PARA system, which is a whole organization system talked about by Tiago Forte. Stands for Project Areas, Resources, and Archives. If you don't know what it is, check out his video. I'll link it in the description below. And you can learn more about organizing in your second brain. The next thing I do is I go through my notes for the past week. I have all of my notes, which are highlights from books, articles, podcasts that I read. sync up into Roam Research with an app called Readwise. Readwise is an app that sends all of the highlights you take from your medias of consumption seamlessly without you having to do anything. And as I'm going through these notes, I am very, very quickly deciding if they are relevant to a project, an area, or a resource that I am currently working on. Organization without action is futile. So when I'm going through this process, I make sure I don't organize too analytically. I use what I like to call forest tagging approach rather than a tree. It essentially means I tag things with their broader type of perspective, what they are on a broader scale, than going super specific into something which I likely won't see again in the future. So let's go through each of these and quickly see if they're relevant to any project that I'm working on. So to me, this is relevant to creativity, and that's it, I think. To me, this is relevant also to creativity and work, and yeah. Task that takes care of this. For me, this is relevant to my area on productivity and task management. And this is a book that I read on a productivity system developed by chefs called Mise en Place. So this is relevant to my cooking, to my productivity, to task management, to delegation, and I will definitely write a book summary on this at some point as a project. So I'm already going to create a book summary outline. And that way, when I come in to create a book summary out of this, it's already ready. This is relevant to my Cornell education because I'm currently trying to look into grad schools and becoming a professor. And now we've reached the bottom of our notes. Next thing I do is I process my tasks. Now, as I'm going through my tasks, I go to the upcoming tab in my to-do list so I can see all the tasks I have for my next week scheduled out. And then what I do is I order them based off of when I would like to have them completed. So I prioritize them. And I also try and keep them to a amount where I know I can actually finish the amount that I give. A lot of people, when they give themselves tasks in a to-do list, they try and bite off more than they can chew and end up completely failing on all these tasks that they set out for themselves. So right now, as you can see, my only task right now for today is to complete this weekly review. And then in this upcoming week, I have a couple other tasks that I have delegated. But I think that I can add a bit more here because I don't have that much stuff going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my projects and I will look at anything that I can add in as a task during some of these days. So I think I'm going to kickstart this project for creating a blog analytics strategy on Tuesday because I have nothing else planned to do then. And I have been wanting to do this for a while. I finally have some time opening up. And I would like to do this before because I like to schedule tasks that I want to do first in my day at the top. And then anything that is less important to me, I schedule further down. so that I do the most important things first. Now going through here, everything looks quite good for the next couple of days, and I think we're good to go. Now the next step in my weekly review is to plan activities with some friends. During this part of my weekly review, I go into my calendar and I just pre-schedule some dinner parties or a walk with a friend, and then I message them if they'd be open to do that. And that way I get the first initial step in starting a social plan with some friends. Hopefully it works out. So now that I've pre-scheduled out some plans, I will create a task in my to-do list to message friends about plans, and I will do that after this weekly review. The last thing that I'm going to do before I start my reflection is to review my 12 favorite questions. Now my 12 favorite questions are 12 questions that I've created for myself that I deem the most important or interesting things I'm trying to answer, or at least come closer to an answer to in my life. And I use these to frame every action that I do, every piece of information I consume, and the actions I undertake. And these change all the time. But because I review them during my weekly reviews, they become top of mind every single time that I do one of these. And it helps me be more intentional with what I do for the rest of the week. So now that I've reviewed all of my questions, we get on to the last and my favorite part of the weekly review, which is reflecting on my journal entries from the last week. So what I do is first, I have another Rome Research tab open, and I'm going to go to my story-worthy moments, because that is the first question inside of my weekly reflection, which is, what was the most story-worthy moment of the week? What a story-worthy moment is it's a thing that I learned in a book called Storyworthy by Matthew Dix, where every day you spend a small amount of time, maybe 2-3 minutes, asking yourself what the most story-worthy moment of your entire day was. A 5-minute moment of your day that could be turned into a story. And then you write it down. The idea is that over time you accumulate all these little snippets of the most story-worthy parts of your life that you can then use as ideas for stories to tell. So I'm going to go through the last week and see what I think was the most story-worthy moment. So I think out of everything, this was definitely the most story-worthy moment for me. It was a moment yesterday where we had a good friend of ours ask for one of us, me or my brother, to drive up for 10 hours and get a birth certificate for them because their passport went out of renewal and they needed to get on a flight and renew it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to go. And we had a conversation with my parents about if you are obligated to do a generous act like that for a friend. Personally, me and my brother thought you definitely should, because friends are some of the most important things in life. But my dad did not feel the same way. And I felt like that was a very story-worthy moment. So I'm going to copy the reference for this, which is something really cool you can do in Rome Research, and copy it under this, what was the most story-worthy moment of the week. And the reason I like doing this in Rome Research and copying the reference is that I now can see where this story-worthy moment came inside of my database. So I can see that it came under 8/6/2022, which is really cool. So then I go to my journal or my daily logs, which is where I put down all of the most important stuff that I don't want to forget inside of Rome Research. And I first asked myself, what was the most enjoyable event of the week? What were the 3 big wins for the week? What were the 3 most enjoyable events of the week? And I do that by going through my entire daily log from the last week. So let's see what we can find. So this was a big win. I negotiated a pay raise with my editor, Dan, and it went very well. So I see that as a big win. This was hilarious. This was a yoga session that I did with my mom and 2 friends and my brother, and we were dying laughing because it was so stupid. We did yoga in a school basketball court. I thought it was hilarious. This was a really enjoyable moment where I talked with one of the YouTubers and an accountability group I'm in about a potential niche direction he wants to go in, and he really appreciated it. I'm sorry, I accidentally put that in the what was the most enjoyable event of the week, so I need to move that. Oh, this was really funny. I watched Bollywood movie with my dad, my brother, and I, and it was completely different culturally from what you usually see. So that was really fun. This was a big win. I wrote a ton about a book that I read called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, and that was a really great book on Stoicism that I read. So that was a big win with how much progress I made on that article that I had been writing for a while. So this happens all the time where I end up getting 4 things in here, and then I end up moving one to the what was the most enjoyable event of the week. And I think out of all of these, the most enjoyable one was probably talking with my accountability group partner. The reason that was the most enjoyable event of the week is he had asked me if I could help him with his niching for his YouTube channel completely out of the blue. I hadn't planned to talk to him, and I ended up giving him 2.5 hours of my time with him only having asked for 30 minutes. So he was very appreciative of that, and I felt like it was the best way that I could be using my time at the moment, which is why I think it was so enjoyable. It was just a genuine interaction where we were talking and I wasn't expecting anything in return. So then the next step is I go through a list of the best things that I have learned, and every single day I ask myself the question, what is the best thing I've learned? And during my weekly review, I go through these last 7 days and I look at all the things I wrote and I say, what is the best thing out of all the best things that I learned? And that way, in my weekly review, I get this accumulation of just incredibly insightful stuff. Now, this was really insightful. I learned this as I was talking to Peter in our accountability session. It's that as a creative, you must continually remind yourself of why you create. Every time you become disconnected from your why and the human connection you're trying to have, you lose your energy to create. And I resonate with this a lot because the more that you create in a creative medium, the easier it is to lose connection with why you started in the first place. And I have to constantly remind myself of why I started, otherwise I burn out. And the last thing that I ask in my reflection is, what did I like and not like about my life roles for the week? So my life roles that I've given myself are health, relationships, and teaching. And I essentially run, just like with my 12 favorite questions, all of my actions and commitments through these three things. I want all of the things I do to help with these in some way because these are what I deem most important. So for health, I loved how I stuck completely to my workout routine for the last week, which I was really proud of. I didn't have any falling outs. And I also was a little bit more flexible with it because my mom wanted me to join her on quite a few runs this last week as well. So instead of doing my normal run on my own, I joined her, which I really like. I don't think there was anything I didn't like about my health this last week. For my relationships, I love how much I connected with friends and family through cooking. I've been cooking a lot this last week, and we've been having a great time eating those things that I've been trying out, and it's been really great for strengthening the relationships that I do have. I made a Moroccan beef braise yesterday, and my family loved it. So I'm going to continue trying to cook in the future. Now, what I do wish that I did better is be a little bit less quick to act and judge when I hear someone say something. Because sometimes when a family member says something that I don't like, I immediately respond, which usually means I respond with anger or annoyance in my voice. And if I just waited a couple seconds, it would be fine. So I wish I took more time to respond when a family member says something this way. I say something when I cooler head. As far as my teaching goes, I wrote for an hour and a half every single morning, which is a habit I've been sticking to for a while, which I'm really proud of. And I started work on the short project that I started this last week. This was a project I started for my YouTube channel to create YouTube shorts. So all of these things directly help with my teaching, and I'm very glad that I stuck to them. But I think I would like to have more times where I consume books at night, because I've noticed in the past couple of weeks I've struggled to stick consistently every day to reading quite a bit in the later parts of the day because I am socially interacting so much, and I notice it's definitely taken away from my teaching in some aspects because I don't have as much information to talk to others about. So I'd like to consume books at night a little more. And that's it. That's my weekly review. I'm completely finished. We can go to my task list, check off the weekly review, and we're good. And the thing that I love about this process is most of us have so much information coming at us all day, every day. Tasks from other people, commitments, all these things just getting barreled at us. but we never have a system to sit down and clean all of our inboxes out and also reflect on the last week as a whole. I once heard a quote that wisdom doesn't come from experience, it comes from reflecting on experience, and that is what this weekly review is for. I'm really passionate about a concept called lifestyle design, which is slowly creating a lifestyle that is perfect for you. And the way that you do that is through collecting data from your own life, what you enjoyed the most, what brings you energy, what things matter most to you, and getting closer and closer to making that reality in your everyday, your average day. And by going through this weekly review process, reflecting on all these questions and cleaning out my inbox, I do exactly that. So I strongly suggest that you try out doing a weekly review yourself. You don't have to start out doing something this detailed, even though it didn't take that long to do. But just getting in the habit of going through and cleaning out the inboxes, reflecting on your last week is going to be so good for getting you closer to living the life that you want to live. Be sure to check out my blog post on what I learned after doing 54 weekly reviews in the description. And in that blog post, I go a little bit more in depth, especially into this last section, in the 5 biggest lessons I learned after looking at all of my reflections from my journal over 54 weekly reviews. As always, have a fantastic rest of your day, and bye-bye.